This podcast is sponsored by BetterHelp. After experiencing trauma, I went to therapy, and my therapist guided me through a difficult time in my life. They helped me understand what was happening and provided me with tools to cope and find my own strength and resilience. Their experience and compassion were invaluable and enabled me to rebuild my life and move forward. I strongly believe in the power of therapy to help people through difficult times. BetterHelp connects you with a licensed therapist who is trained to listen and give you helpful, unbiased advice. First, you go to their site. You can use my link, betterhelp.com/resilience. You answer a few questions, and BetterHelp will match you to a professional who has years of experience helping people with struggles just like yours. Let BetterHelp connect you to a therapist who can support you, all from the comfort of your own home. Visit betterhelp.com/resilience or choose podcast, then notes on resilience during sign up and enjoy a special discount on your first month.
That's a perfect analogy for crisis leadership in terms of how as a leader can you calm the people that you're leading in a way, and you have to have some level of demonstrated skill set for them to feel calm, because they may not have the skill set, which is one of the reasons why they feel so anxious in the first place when crisis happens. Because crisis for a fighter is different than a crisis for a mother. Like, that crisis is going to be looked at, processed completely different, because it could be the first time for this mother, and firefighters is a daily job.
Hello, and welcome to Notes on Resilience. I'm your host, Manya Chalinsky. Today we have another episode in our Crisis Leadership series. I'm speaking to Martin Sims, who's the founder of the Dope Coach Academy, where he uses the Neurosequential Model to help youth deal with crises, trauma, and mental health issues. We had a really wonderful conversation about leading in a crisis, about his experience in Hurricane Harvey and in the pandemic, and what we need to think about as we're dealing with a crisis. I think you're really going to enjoy this conversation. Hi, Martin. I'm so glad we're finally getting a chance to do this episode. Thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me. Thanks so much. And we had a great podcast episode, or was it a webinar? Whoever we did with Ingrid Cochran, it was amazing. Was it Constance? And then Jesse.
Yes.
Yeah, that was amazing.
It was absolutely amazing. And I will let you and our listeners in on a little secret. I am turning that webinar into a 3-podcast series. So for our listeners, you're going to get to hear Martin again.
Go.
Hey, Martin, before we dive into the topic, the question I like to start with, if you could have dinner with any historical figure, who would it be and why?
It would always be Muhammad Ali. I felt like I was supposed to meet him before he passed. But so I was named after Ali. My middle name is Ali. I grew up just looking up to Muhammad Ali and, you know, the different stories that comes out about him, even before he passed. And so then I would buy his daughter's books. I think Muhammad Ali was the first big novel book that I ever read. I don't know how old I was, maybe 10 or 11, something like that. So like, it was a thick autobiography, and I read it. And so then the movies came out with Will Smith and different documentaries here and there. So like, he's just somebody that was just so historical. And then even all the way to the Olympics in '96. So like, Muhammad Ali would probably be, absolutely, that would be who I would love to sit down and just pick his brain.
Oh, yeah. Wow. Yes. Oh, and I wish I could make it happen. And I wish I could listen in, because I know he's got
right?
amazing stories. All right. But let's get into, I've got you on to talk about crisis leadership, and you have a little bit of a different take on this than some of our other guests who are talking a little bit more about, you know, a crisis hits like an earthquake, or a crisis hits an organization and they need to reply. You deal with youth in crisis on a daily basis. So How do you define leading in a crisis?
So I've been in those situations. I was in Katrina when Katrina happened in Mississippi when they had the situation in New Orleans. I also was in Hurricane Harvey when there was this flood in Houston.
Oh
And
my.
so, yeah, I have, honest to God, I think that was the catalyst for the work that I do right now in terms of like the philanthropy work and things of that nature. So in Harvey, I left Houston to go to Lake Charles in order to avoid the storm. But I didn't have a car at the time, so I took a shuttle. I took a shuttle to the casino. I'm not gonna make that a long story, but I had complimentary tickets to be at a LeBairs Hotel Casino in Lake Charles. I stayed there for a couple of days. That's where I was at for the storm to pass. And then there was no shuttle to go back because I-10 was underwater. So long story short, I ended up getting a U-Haul truck. A friend of mine had started doing some relief efforts. By the time it was time for me to leave there, of course, Houston was probably half of Houston was underwater completely. Like half the homes had been submerged. So the U-Haul, me going to get a U-Haul to gather supplies to drive back to Houston versus taking a shuttle back was the beginning of it. And it like took off because it went viral and it was people were sending me donations from everywhere. And so we just basically started a relief mission.
Okay.
Start with the U-Haul, and I want to say we probably over the course of 6 weeks with the U-Haul, we might have delivered maybe $500,000 worth of like goods to people who had lost everything, and
Wow.
so it was a great thing that started off and got a lot of support for the things that I do now, which is when I did it at the time as well, but I was in youth sports, and so those kids that some of them had lost everything, or some of what I'm saying, that was one of the things, and some of them didn't have much to lose in the first place, and so everybody lost things during Harvey, so it wasn't one of those socio-economic things, just depending on where the floods were and where the deepest water were, no matter what type of house you had, what type of income you had, you were affected by it. And so when the relief efforts start coming and the recovery efforts start coming and the restoration efforts start coming, well, that's distributed differently during those times. And so the haves and the have-nots still in a relief situation. So going into that, I think that was my first time actually embodying being a leader during a crisis. And I'm not saying, I mean, this was a major disaster. And so I did pick up on a lot of things because it was such an intense experience. And so there was a lot of patterns that I saw emerge and things that worked, things that probably would never work, things that I knew why they worked because they had these structures in place versus us just, hey, I got a great idea and I got a truck. You know what I mean? So I definitely recognize what structure could do, even in a crisis, just things that you have prepared before you get into a crisis.
Right.
So a friend of mine had a 501c3. We didn't. They got far more, help from different organizations or companies and things of that nature. I never forget. We were, which is one of the reasons why I started my 501c3, we were getting stuff from Walmart for donations that had been sent through like various like Cash App, Venmo donations people were sending via social media and things. So, but a friend of mine had a 501c3 and they just gave us the whole order. Walmart did. Yeah. Because they knew what we were doing. We were showing them videos from the day before to see. So that is like, you start to pick up on things that can make a difference, even though I'm passionate about it. I wasn't no more passionate about it than my friend was, but he had a 501c3 piece of paper where they could give him some relief and effort. So I thought that was amazing to see in the middle of a crisis what could make things go further. And then that's a bit of the strategy in that. But, the rest of everything was I worked for FedEx for a long time. So I understood distribution. So when I got a U-Haul truck for it, it was, I had no idea that this skill would ever be something meaningful, but it turned out to be something so meaningful that I don't think anyone else during that time would have been able to execute it without that knowledge that I had at the time.
It's so interesting that a crisis happens and you do what you do, what you need to do in the moment. And you took your skills and your friend and used it to help people. So that's, to me, the definition of crisis leadership, which is it was born in that moment. You saw what needed to be done and you did it. What do you think were the personal qualities or skills that made you able to do that in that moment?
I had gone through Katrina before, and if we remember how bad it got during Katrina, I
Mhm.
think this time around I wasn't in a space, and I was in a much more aware space of how these things work. I think I was maybe in my early 20s when Katrina happened. I probably was in my late 20s when Hurricane Harvey happened. So I had seen what not doing anything would lead to, right? And so because it was a very similar storm in terms of flooding to Katrina, I kind of just sprang into action. And what happened was my initial action opened up everything. So I didn't think I would be out there for 6 weeks. It was just like, hey, look, this is the crisis that I'm in. The crisis I was in was I was in a hotel that I had to get out of. Like they was like, hey, call FEMA. FEMA can help you because the following weekend was Labor Day weekend and the entire hotel was booked. So it was like they didn't even have additional rooms for me to even stay there. So I had to get back home. And in my heart of hearts, what happened was I was like, I have to do this anyway. I might as well help as many people along the way as I can. That's where the U-Haul thought came from.
Yeah.
And the deeper version of it was, I know if we don't do something, we can't wait for the government to do it immediately because we saw what happened when Katrina happened. And so I didn't wait. I just when I had the thought of the U-Haul, I was like, well, that's what we're gonna do for at least me getting back to Houston and
Right.
on the I'm right by Walmart. These people could just donate and put things on the U-Haul truck and I go. Now I had no idea it would be how it was, meaning like it went viral immediately. Like the second time I opened my U-Haul truck, somebody that was on HBO at the time put it on their Instagram, and within I don't know, maybe a matter of 10 minutes, like people was flooding my DM with like, how do I help? How do I help? How do I help? Where should I send this? Where should I send it? The first day I opened up my U-Haul, it was been the first day because I went out there the first night. But the first day I opened up my U-Haul, I had a full U-Haul of waters, and then we could get on the road and go straight to help people immediately. And then that's where you really see the devastation because I was far enough to only see it on the news. But as I
Yeah.
took the water and I started dealing with the people with the waters, and you realize like we brought a truck full of water. They need so much more. Like they lost everything. Like the babies need formula, diapers, feminine products, so many different things. Like in the immediacy of trying to help, you realize what else is needed. And so, but from that point on, I felt like I had tapped into something, and the crisis and responding to the crisis, I feel like it just carried me through until by the time those 6 weeks was up, I felt like I was living a completely different life. And I was. It absolutely changed my life completely.
It does change you. I mean, that kind of work and being able to see the impact that you were able to make directly with the individuals that you were working with. And then how did you take that experience and the skills that you learned into the rest of your life and the work that you're doing now?
Well, because it was such a viral moment, then people would begin to, if I said we were going to do something, then people were pretty much like, oh, he would do it. So when I had to garner support for different community initiatives, whether it been something with my basketball team, whether it been when we went out to feed the homeless, whatever I was asking as an endeavor that I would be doing, we would have enough support to get it done.
Yeah.
And so, that kind of grew. So that turned into me being more open to asking or more open to attempting to do something and expecting somewhere along the way the help would come. And for the most part, for the vast majority of the time, that's what takes place. And we're learning more and more how to do it, how to be more strategic in going about doing these things, and even more intentional. Where we are now is that was Hurricane Harvey might have happened 6 or 7 years ago at this point. It's 2017, so I've been 7 years ago. And so initially it started a lot of the things that I'm doing. And coincidentally enough, the basketball team that I was working with, they dealt with Harvey, and I stayed with them until the beginning of the pandemic. And then again, it's 7 years ago. So they were just getting to high school during the pandemic, or they experienced starting high school during online like everyone else.
Yeah.
So that was adjustment for them. And so then we tried to put the mental health program in for them during COVID, early during the lockdown periods. And that was where we also saw like the deeper the crisis, the deeper the need for some of these mental health practices, and the deeper the need to be, trauma informed and understand temperaments and understand needing the rest and all those things. And so, we was teaching them different strategies and techniques to like ground themselves, do affirmations, meditations, breath work, all the type of things that they could take some level of control for their emotions and their reactions to things, even understanding we're under duress. This is a new environment. Nobody has ever dealt with this before. There's a great deal of unpredictability and uncertainty that's in the air for not only the kids, but their parents, for the politicians, business owners. Everything's shut down. People losing their jobs. There's a lot of things going on. And so once we created that environment for the kids and recognize that, hey, we don't have to be therapists to create a therapeutic environment for the ones that we love. And that was what we could do at the time. And what happened was that thought, that idea, that endeavor that we set out to do during COVID, it had far more reaching implications than any of us could ever see at that time, because the junior NBA, the youth version of the NBA, they caught wind of it. They nominated us for Program of the Year for how we handled the pandemic with our kids. And then that turned into a relationship with an education first, and then a relationship with the Neurosequential Model and Dr. Perry and Megan Bartlett. And then that turned into me really, really, really getting a chance for like 3 years straight to be under their tutelage of learning these models of healing trauma and how to deal with people during a crisis, what it's doing to the brain, what that's doing to the behaviors, how we can respond to that and engage with that in an understanding way, and to create the environments that are needed during crisis. And so the whole journey is actually quite surreal for me, because I became a fan of Dr. Perry the minute I was introduced to his work. And so I had, for it all to culminate into like, I'm actually in here and they actually know my name and they know how, that was really, really surreal. But it felt very much like a calling. Yeah. And so there was some parts of me that's like, man, I can't believe I'm here. And then other parts of me, like, I'm absolutely where I'm supposed to be.
Martin, you have been in the right/wrong place at the right/wrong time, right? So yes. These things happened to you. I mean, the pandemic happened to all of us, but you were in a position to take a leadership role for these youth that you were working with and really use your knowledge of crisis and trauma and recovery. And maybe without even knowing it before that, for Hurricane Harvey, you were in the place where you could help, and you did. And that's an amazing thing for the folks that you've helped. And it must feel really good too, to know that you've been able to help people during crises.
It's been spiritually fulfilling, and it's been a confidence building process over the time, because if at some point my intention was to be impactful, mm-hmm. and then I've been presented with opportunities to make some type of impact. I feel like for me, my biggest internal driver is, it doesn't matter how small or big the impact is. If it's a conversation on the side of the road when I might be in a rush and I might have to talk to somebody who looks like they need this, that's as big as me putting on an event to raise money for something, or that's as big as me going out to feed the homeless when we make it a big deal. And, there's been times when nobody's seen the impact that I've tried to make, because it's just the things that I have in my trunk, right? And I'm just now learning to capture things on camera and to utilize it in the right way. Because the fact of the matter is, I would do this if you never saw me do it or not. Yeah. What I started to realize is people still need behaviors modeled for them at times. And so then I try to figure out the best ways where we can be like, hey, look, if everybody did what I did, or if some people duplicated this, and it doesn't take much. I wasn't well off when the hurricane happened. Like, you could do it from where you are. Like, some people have so many things that have happened to them that they're not in the position you're in. Even if we all went through COVID, it doesn't affect everybody the same. There are some subgroups and some groups that is going to devastate more than others, particularly in the Black community. That's something that we generally are at the bottom of the barrel when it comes to resources distributed, if they're distributed in a way, and that's from healthcare all the way down to just some financial resources where we don't have to be on government assistance or things of that nature, where those opportunities come from. And so me just having a great understanding of what life is lived like without
Mm-hmm.
resources and what the difference could be if said resources are available and education and training is also provided with the resource,
Right.
because
Right.
you just need a mindset and a skill set. I think they both go hand in hand. So if you are given a skill set without the proper mindset, you won't utilize it properly. Same
Mm-hmm.
thing, if you have a mindset, but you don't have a skill set, there you can't move the things around that you may need to move in order to create a better environment, so to
Yeah.
speak. So I preach to my kids all the time, and I use basketball as an analogy, but I tell them skills equal freedom. You know what I'm saying? Skills equal freedom. Like the more skills you have. And I just had this conversation with my nephew the other day. I'm standing outside playing basketball at my sister's house, and I'm dribbling the basketball. I'm not playing the whole game. I'm just dribbling the basketball. And then he wants to come do it. And she's immediately like, no, you can't do it. Put the ball down, this, that, and the third. And the reason being is because she feels like her stuff is going to be damaged by him doing it. She doesn't
Mm-hmm.
have that level of fear to when I'm doing it, because I have so much control over this. It doesn't make it feel like something's going to break.
Right.
So that's a perfect analogy for crisis leadership, in terms of how as a leader can you calm the people that you're leading in a way, and you have to have some level of demonstrated skill set for them to feel calm, because they may not have the skill set, which is one of the reasons why they feel so anxious in the first place when crisis happens. Because crisis for a fighter is different than a crisis for a mother. Like that crisis is going to be looked at, processed completely different, because it could be the first time for this mother, and firefighters is a daily job. He knows the protocol, he knows the procedures, he knows the communications, he knows all of those things. So he doesn't approach a fire in the same way that someone who does not have those skills approaches.
Right. Absolutely. And how have you been taking care of your own mental health as you're dealing with these crises? What is it that's helped you?
I'm pretty strong on boundaries. So if I'm tired or I can't do it, or it's a no, then it's a, because I used to be one of those type of people that like will go until I crash. And in a way I'm like that, but I just have a better understanding of my own energy levels. I can tell you when I'm like, I don't have no more for today. And generally I'm like that, period. I'm pretty good in the mornings. I can get way more done from like 5 to 10 a.m. than most people can get done all day.
Yep.
And if that's uninterrupted, which is not in the last 4 years. I have a 4-year-old. He came
Yes.
during the second week of the lockdown. So that, yeah, the whole pandemic it was far more crisis than I can even tell you. I was going through a knee surgery and a newborn baby and a lockdown and a
Oh,
brand
wow.
new team all at the same time. So yeah, that I got a crash course in crisis leadership during that period.
Yes, you did.
And now that things have kind of not felt so intense on a daily basis, and the pandemic lockdowns and the travel ban, other things that came along with that, now that things have kind of settled and people like get back to normal, and there's in-person gathering, things of that nature, since the kids been able to go back to school. This recent graduating class would be the class that started high school and the pandemic. And so now you're getting the people who have had that interruption going into the workforce, starting college and things of that nature. So it's interesting to see what we know what the pandemic babies were doing, but a lot of people were at different inflection points in their lives during 2020 or 2021 that had to reset, do something, shift, start something else. I knew for a fact that when that started that people were going to have to like pivot. And I actually just doubled down on what I pivoted into in terms of this mental health situation. And I thought that would be the overall thing when it all was said and done. This is going to be needed regardless. Like people are going to have to be able to get through this, and then what after that. So I will say I had a little bit of foresight, but I had a little bit of time to think about it. The lockdowns took me away from work. My wife was still pregnant, so it wasn't a baby running around. So for the first couple of weeks of lockdown, I sat down and I was like, what can we do to make this better? And coincidentally enough, Dr. Perry had a series, he still has this series out, a YouTube series during the first couple of weeks of the lockdown of different things that would be happening as a collective, according to the neuroscience. And I was into it every day. Like I literally was trying to figure out how to manage it because she was 9 months pregnant already when the lockdown started. So I really needed all the help that I could get. And because it helped me and I knew we was in such a crisis situation, I felt like it would help the kids when we started back playing basketball, and it did. I felt, and like, again, it's been such a confidence building thing because we're trying these things and we are seeing the differences in the outcomes, are seeing the differences in the reactions that the players are having. It's just been such a beautiful unfolding. And now those kids are going into their junior year of college. And so they are now advocates for it. I still got a couple of them still playing collegiately who will come back and mentor the high school kids that we're working with now. And so you can see that it just keeps compounding as we continue to go. And the momentum is just getting there to the point where the pandemic had a silver lining. It made people focus on mental health a lot more than they did before. Yeah. And so now it's a topic that's not brushed under the rug. People will actually try to listen, and whether they get a little or a lot from you, I've studied it so much that I get to share something every time I speak because it's kind of an embodied thing at this point. So, and I don't even want to say kind of, it is an absolutely embodied thing. Like my conversation will lead to some type of level of, hey, I could do this, or I maybe could do that to improve my own space. Because at the end of the day, of everybody who needed a therapist when they got one, we don't have enough therapists to service that. Yeah. So we do have to figure out, like how you asked the question, like how do I, take my self-care type things. And my biggest thing is I just know how to set pretty good boundaries at the end of the day. And if I didn't, I would probably be taken over because my heart wants to do and wants to do and wants to do. Yeah. And so if I can understand when I'm at my capacity and I can recharge, I can do that tomorrow. Yeah. You don't make an important thing super urgent to me, especially if I know it's not urgent.
Yes. That is such an important skill, understanding your boundaries. And you've just given us a really great picture of why that's so important. And Martin, we are at the end of our time, and I could talk to you for about 3 more hours, if not more than that. But to wrap up, can you tell our listeners a little bit about you and your work and how they can reach you if they want to learn more?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm the founder of the Dopest Coach. Well, no, I'm the founder of the Dope Coach Academy, and it's just at the dopestcoach.com. That's the URL that we have it at. We want every coach that we come across to feel like they're the dopest coach that their players ever had. DOPE is an acronym. It's how I explain the neurosequential model by Dr. Perry. I say is we have 4 sequences. The sequences are the development sequence, organizational sequence, the processing sequence, and the engagement sequence of the brain. And I use those sequences at every chance that I get. I try to teach about them. And we want to make it dope. And the reason is sometimes neuroscience and sometimes some of these sciences can just get too school-like, too wordy, too different, and it doesn't reach the people that it's supposed to reach. So we want to make it a cool thing to, we want to make it really, really dope to know exactly how to use your brain to heal your trauma, to process your stress, to manage your emotions, to increase your cognitive abilities, and then to, tap into that space where you reach into your flow state and you don't have to think about it. And it just feels like you're in that flow. And like I alluded to earlier, like after a while, the crisis, I was like on a crisis wave. Like the things that the crisis was producing something in myself to be able to respond to everything. And that's a certain state that I want everybody to experience. And I think everybody has experienced flow state in some way, to where it might have been a song they was writing, a conversation they were having, just something just to just take over and flow. And we can intentionally induce ourselves into those states if we really understand how our brains work. And I just want to share that with anybody that wants to know about it. So you can find me at thedopestcoach.com. On Instagram, you can follow me at thedopestcoach.com. My personal Instagram is SIPONIT, SIPONIT. And it just means take it slow. Don't take shots. Just do it slow. and it'll hit you eventually. So anyway,
That's great, Martin. Thank you so much.
That's me in a nutshell.
We will put links to those in the show notes so people can find you more easily. And thank you so much for talking today about crisis leadership and what that's meant for you and the people that you've worked with.
Thank you so much for having me. Thank you so much.
Thank you for listening. I hope you got as much out of this conversation as I did. So if you'd like to learn more about me, Manya Chilinsky, I work with organizations to help understand how to create environments where people can thrive after difficult life experiences. And I do this through talks and consulting. I'm a survivor of mass violence, and I use my experience to help leaders learn about resiliency, compassion, and trauma-sensitive leadership, to build strategies to enable teams to thrive and be engaged amidst difficulty and turmoil. If this is something you want to learn more about, visit my website, www.manyachilinsky.com, or email me at manya@manyachilinsky, or stop by my social media on LinkedIn and Twitter. Thanks so much.